And joining us now to break down some of the findings in this New York Post report is Steve Bannon. Now, Steve, I understand that you've been following the whole Biden-China ties for a long time, but the most recent report coming out today highlights not necessarily Hunter Biden's ties to Ukraine, but this one is more so China-oriented, and that's something that a lot of people have been talking about for a long time. But from what we're seeing right now, is this tangible evidence to a lot of those allegations?
Oh, I think it's very tangible. It's the reason Rudy and Bob Costello brought me into this project a couple of months ago, was because of the China part and the reason I know the CCP so well. This is stunning. What happened today, this takes it out of what, yesterday set the predicate that Biden has lied. He's lied on the debate stage. He's lied for the last couple of years. He's a liar. But I've always said the Burisma part is dwarfed by China and the CCP. Today, you see that Biden and the family are not just grifters. And Joe Biden's just not a liar. This is a national security problem. Joe Biden and his family are compromised. I don't think Joe Biden could get a security clearance right now, a confidential security clearance. And people in San Diego at the 32nd Street Naval Station, where I was stationed on a destroyer, understand that a guy like Biden right now, being compromised by blood money from the Chinese Communist Party, couldn't get a security clearance. I don't know how he could possibly be commander-in-chief.
And previously, when we would talk about Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, we were talking about something around $50,000 a month, something like that, I believe was the initial claim, at least around the impeachment saga. But I want to read one line from the New York Post really quickly. Another email sent by Biden as part of an August 2nd, 2017 chain involved a deal he struck with since Vanna's chairman of CEFC, Ye Jinming, for half ownership of a holding company that was expected to provide Biden with more than $10 million a year. I mean, is that the type of sums that we're talking about here? Not just $50,000 a month, but from one company, $10 million a year?
Oh, that's just remember, that's just the fees that are being paid. That's not the joint venture equity. The key to that story is that Joe Biden got 10% of the joint venture. The Chinese put up all the money. And remember, this company, China Energy, and CEFC, China Energy Funding Corporation, are two of the most corrupt companies owned by the Chinese Communist Party. It's now in bankruptcy. They were putting up that type of money at $10 million a year just in fees for introductions and for working on the project. The Bidens also owned a huge slug of the equity, and that story talks about how it's divvied up. Joe Biden himself, right, owned 10% of that. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here. This is just not $10 million in current cash flow. This is my point. Between the $1.5 billion they've got in the private equity fund, these different deals and joint ventures they're doing with these Chinese Communist Party companies, you're talking about billions of dollars. This is where Joe Biden, where the real wealth, this is what they were doing, selling access to Joe Biden. Remember, Joe Biden on the stage at the Council on Foreign Relations, he bragged about that he's had 25 hours, more than any world leader, of private one-on-one meetings or dinners with President Xi. Those transcripts have never been released. We've never had a readout. This is my point, Alex. This is a national security problem. This is just not about graft and corruption. That's what Burisma was. This is a national security problem. And one of the keys is the FBI has had this hard drive since the fall of 2019. They protected Biden against Bernie Sanders and all the other components. Remember, this should have been released immediately in the Democratic primary and let the Democratic voters take care of it. Also, President Trump would have never been impeached. If all this came out in November, December of 2019, we would have gotten rid of the whole hoax and fiasco of the impeachment process, and we could have focused on, guess what? The pandemic, the Chinese Communist Party virus that then hit us in January. This is explosive. And that's why do you think Twitter and Facebook are trying to cover up for the guy? They understand this disqualifies him from being president of the United States.
And this is just the latest allegation against the FBI when it comes to covering up certain information. I mean, how long was it where we were furthering along the special counsel investigation into President Trump based on a dossier, which we now know that the FBI knew that the primary subsource of that document was an alleged Russian spy himself, or at least a Russian agent. I mean, the FBI allowed that whole investigation to go on without ever surfacing that information. They allowed the impeachment saga to go on without bringing up this information once again. So I think that that there are very serious credibility questions for the FBI when it comes to this topic. But when we talk to critics about this latest bombshell from the New York Post, they'll look at the inception of these documents. They'll say, well, how do we know that these emails are verified or anything like that? But I know that
here's how you know. It's very simple. Rupert Murdoch, one of the biggest media moguls in the world, owns the New York Post. Rupert Murdoch's lawyers did the due diligence here. That's a fantasy. Rupert Murdoch's one of the most sophisticated, tough media entrepreneurs in the world. His company's market capitalization, I think, is $60 or $70 billion. Don't give me any nonsense of what these guys on the left say, Alex, about, oh, how do you know it's true? Here's why you know it's true. It's on the pages of the New York Post. And if you think it's not true, if the Bidens think it's not true, let them sue the New York Post. Because the New York Post will have full discovery on everything the Bidens have ever done, not just on this hard drive, on every relationship they've had. Let's call the Bidens bluff. If it's false, then sue Rupert Murdoch and the New York Post and let them, they will countersue you. They will get discovery of every text message, every phone call, every email, and let's see where Joe Biden stands. Joe Biden will be ripped apart by that discovery, and that's why right now they're hiding behind Facebook and Twitter.
And building on your point, there are pictures. I mean, you can't necessarily fabricate Hunter Biden, for example, with a crack pipe. You know, that's not something that can be fabricated or anything like that. There are visual pieces of evidence that people can look at for themselves. And
there's 1,000. Listen, this treasure trove. There's 1,000 photographs. There's dozens of tapes. Many of those sex tapes. There are 5 hours, I think, of audio. There's 40,000 emails and text messages. This is a treasure trove. Yeah. People can go through this for a long time. And guess what? Joe Biden's going to have to embrace exactly what he raised in Hunter Biden. And not just that, the entire family, because it's all there, from his brother to his daughter-in-law to all of it. And they're going to have to embrace it, okay? The American people are going to chance to see what Joe Biden's really like, what his character's about, what he does when he needs and wants money. He has sold out his country to the Chinese Communist Party.
And even building on that, too, I mean, the mere fact that we're having this conversation is an idea that this information was not well kept confidential. I mean, it very much so could have been used as blackmail against not only Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden. So the fact that we're having this conversation about this evidence that we did find, is there anything to suggest that there's more out there and it's been out there for a long time? Because this is just the first of we're hearing about this.
This is just one hard drive off of this guy. He took trips they set him up with women in China. They know all about this. This is what the CCP does. It's called BGY, right? That's their phrase for it. They use the internet. They also use money, and they use women, right? Or they use sex. This is what they do to compromise people. Joe Biden and his family have been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. People in the intelligence apparatus know that. It's quite evident. You know, Kurt Campbell and Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, who's his foreign policy advisors, right now have to come forward and say, what did you know? When did you know it? How did you know about James Biden, the brother? And by the way, he's a major character in this. James Biden, what did you know about Hunter being in China, cutting these deals, taking this money from really the most disreputable of all the CCP companies? I mean, China Energy is so controversial. The head, they think he's been executed. The number two guy that's names on the signature basis of the engagement letter was in federal prison and has now been extradited back to Hong Kong. These are the dirtiest guys of the dirtiest companies with the dirtiest political machine in the world, and that is who the Bidens are in business with.
And you bring up Tony Blinken, and I believe he's the individual who a lot of people are saying facilitated one of these meetings at the White House. Am I correct to say that?
Blinken's name's all over a bunch of these emails. Blinken's got to come forward, I think. Tony Blinken wants to be Secretary of State. I guess, hey, guess what? If Biden was ever to win, which he won't, but he's ever to win, your confirmation hearing just got a lot tougher, brother. You better come forward now and tell everything you know about this. Jake Sullivan ought to come forward. He seems like a pretty decent guy. You know, Kurt Campbell writes all these great things in foreign affairs about how they're going to, what they're going to do with China. Let me tell you what they're not going to do with China. They're not going to recouple. We're decoupling from the Chinese Communist Party, not from the nation of China and not from the decent, hardworking Chinese. I've dedicated my life to working with the Chinese people for their liberation from the slave labor that the Chinese Communist Party has them under. The most decent, hardworking people on earth. They're great people. They're enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party. And Joe Biden took blood money. They've taken blood money from the Chinese Communist Party to, one, sell out their nation, and number two, to sell out the Chinese people.
And Steve, I know you're a busy man, so I'm going to let you go. But before I do, I want to ask one last question. We know now that Hunter Biden, at least according to these emails, was selling his father's influence. I mean, it is in them. There's no dispute about that, according to these emails. Is there any evidence? We know that the New York Post is maybe working on another piece of this series. That's what Rudy Giuliani told me last night. Do we know if there's another example, another smoking gun, if you will, of Joe Biden following through on that influence, exerting his political power in a way that was for his own political benefit in exchange for cash funds or anything like that?
I would say stand by. You'll see the New York Post is coming out with a number of other stories. Other media groups are starting to get involved now, too. I think there's going to be a bright road. Look, it takes a long time to go through 40,000 emails and text messages and to go through and inventory all the photographic evidence that's here. So I would say just stand by. This story, this is why Twitter and Facebook shut it down. They understand how this thing's metastasizing on a global basis. I really think we're at the top of the first inning right now.
Yeah, and just to be clear, they didn't shut it down based on misinformation. They shut it down because they could not independently verify it themselves. In other ways, it was viewpoint discrimination based on an article that they did not like. And I think that is very important to be clear about this as we're talking about the idea of tech censorship. But Steve Bannon, it's a real pleasure having you on the show tonight. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, brother. I love your show. I love One America. I love the audience. You guys keep hammering.
I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.